So the convoy was very successful in raising the media profile of the siege, raising the issue. Greece, Turkey, the Middle East. I know we were in the Chinese media, so a lot of the media of the world, most of the world, we were a big story, and there was a lot of regular coverage about what was happening to us. The big contrast, of course, was that there was no coverage in the British media. When we got to the south of Jordan and were denied entry into Egypt, which from there, Jordan is the one place where it's really easy to get to Egypt, because there's a ferry, a 4-hour short ferry crossing across the Red Sea to Nuweiba, and it's an existing ferry service, so we could have just paid our fee, got off the other side. It's a 4-hour crossing, and then it's a 4-hour drive up to Gaza. So we were half a day's journey from Gaza at this point when we got to the south of Aqaba, and we were told, no, you can't come this way. And so we stayed in Aqaba 5 days negotiating and trying to see if they might change their minds. The Egyptians, trying to see if they might change their minds. And from that moment, and this was Christmas Eve when we landed, from that moment onwards, in the Middle East, we were the story. Number one, headline story, every bulletin, every day, from that point onwards until after we got into Gaza. British press, despite the fact it's a British convoy, British people stranded on Christmas Day with medicines and toys, for children in Gaza, that's not a story. That wasn't a story. The stories were snow and the Pope, I believe, the Doddery Pope. And it really shows up this idea that a lot of people have that, you need to spin the story the right way, you need to give it the right angle, and then, that's the problem. It's not that, people like a sensationalist thing, or you do it this way, you do it that way, or it's not deliberate, it's not a blackout, it's just this, it's just that, It was very, very, very clear that, in fact, there's a deliberate policy of blacking out anything to do with the siege and to do with helping the siege, helping to break the siege. And quite notable that, so the one country in Western Europe where there was a breakthrough in the media really was Ireland. And even in the north, they got a lot of local media coverage. And again, that shows you the very different culture of the place and the people. That even BBC Radio Foyle was covering and talking to the guys on the convoy, because there's no way they could get away with not doing it, given the political situation there and the kind of community they're dealing with. If they want to maintain any credibility, they have to do it. And so they did do it. But everywhere else, there were little bits of local media mentions occasionally where there were very strong contingents or people had connections. But for the main part, and certainly in the national, the left-leaning, Guardian, Independent, the liberally papers, not a sentence. BBC website, where there's plenty of space. Right? I think one article had one sentence that didn't mention the name of the convoy or the organisation or what we were doing, anything like that, just at the bottom of one article. By about 27th or 28th, there was some kind of oblique reference in a buried part. And on BBC mainstream news, ITV, nothing, no mention at all. But what happened once we got to Nuweiba was the role of Egypt in the siege of Gaza suddenly became very much clearer to an awful lot of people. We know that there are compliant regimes in the Middle East. We know that's how, or one of the ways in which, the situation there is maintained, the status quo is maintained. The Arab people's anger is kept sort of kettled in by paying off these compliant regimes to be friendly towards Israel. But it suddenly becomes very, very clear, hang on a minute, who are these people controlling this border and why? If the border at Rafah was open, the however many miles it is that Egypt controls of Gaza's border, there would be no siege. Now, Israel, there's a logic to how it behaves. It has to behave the way it behaves if it wants to continue surviving. Of course, the irony is it keeps doing it and it won't continue surviving. But that's oppression all over, right? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, in the end. But Egypt, a fellow Arab nation, the Egyptians in El Arish and the Palestinians in Rafah are the same people, and they feel that, they know that, they are brothers. And for an Arab regime to be not just complicit but a partner in this extermination that's going on, in this attempt at extermination that's going on in Gaza, is really, really, really criminal. And it's why, people in the Middle East will say to you, Egypt is worse than Israel, worse than Israel. No, they're not worse than Israel in that sense, but the feeling against it is there's so much more revulsion, because people they get why Israel behaves the way it behaves, but they don't get, why does Egypt do it, and why do the people put up with it that they behave like that. Now of course Egypt, it turns out, is the second biggest recipient of US aid after Israel. And the Mubarak regime is fantastically unpopular. It's a real police state. It's been a police state for 35 years, something like that.
If not longer.
And it is very, very unpopular. And I think that having all of the media coverage focus on Egypt all that time will have made a difference in the public opinion of the Middle East, and even it's made it back into the West a little bit, into the Western media. I've heard a couple of times discussion about Egypt's role in Gaza, which we never used to hear about